Tell me something. Have you ever been stabbed in the back by the very people you spent your whole life taking care of, and had it happen in front of 100 watching eyes? Because that's exactly what happened to me. I'm Ethan Cole, 58, a lineman out of Houston, and on the night everyone gathered to honor my 35 years of keeping their lights on, my wife walked up on stage, smiled at the crowd, and handed me a manila envelope. "You deserve freedom," she said. Inside, divorce papers. But the part that still burns the deepest is that my kids, my own flesh and blood, started clapping like it was some kind of victory. If you're hearing this, hit subscribe and stay with me. This is not the kind of story you walk away from. To understand that night at the hall, you need to know the 35 years before it. I've spent my whole life in a hard hat and Red Wing boots, climbing poles for Houston Energy. Summers when the heat wrapped around you like a wet blanket, hurricanes blowing sideways rain, ice storms that had no business showing up in Texas. I was out there. While most people were indoors praying the power would come back, I was the guy out in the dark making it happen. I wasn't chasing some big title. I just wanted what every working man wants: a roof over our heads, food on the table, shoes on my kids' feet. That was it. Simple. Honest. I thought that was enough. I thought being the quiet provider, the man who just showed up and did what a man's got to do, would mean something. For a long time, I believed it did. When the kids were little, they'd wave when I pulled the bucket truck into the driveway. Linda used to pack my lunch and kiss my cheek. But somewhere along the way, the waves stopped. The kisses turned into sighs, and my own family, slowly, just stopped seeing me. You could hear it in the way Linda talked about me. We'd be at a neighborhood cookout, paper plates, cheap beer, kids running around. Someone would ask, "So, what does your husband do, Linda?" She'd smile that tight little smile and say, "Oh, Ethan, he just works for the city." Just works for the city. Not he's a lineman. Not he keeps your lights on when the storm hits. Just some faceless city employee, like I push papers in a basement. Then her friends would take over. One's a cardiologist. Mine owns a logistics company. Mine runs his own firm. They'd brag about lake houses, business trips, second homes in Florida. I'd be standing right there holding a plate of overcooked burgers, nodding along like background noise. Nobody asked me a follow-up. Nobody looked me in the eye. I felt like a piece of furniture Linda happened to bring with her, and every time she said, "He just works for the city," it felt like she was throwing me under the bus with a smile. That was the first place I really learned. You can live in your own house and still be invisible in it. That feeling of being invisible didn't stop with Linda. It bled into the way my own kids talked about me. I remember this one Saturday, Josh's friend's BBQ in a nice subdivision, fresh trucks in the driveways, guys in golf polos, craft beer in little coolers. I was standing by the grill, flipping burgers, just happy to be invited. One of the dads asked Josh, loud enough for half the yard to hear, "So, what does your old man do?" Josh didn't even look at me. He took a sip of his drink and said, "He's in utilities, just city stuff." City stuff. Like I was a vague expense on a tax form. The guy nodded, eyes already drifting away, and they went right back to talking about residency programs and private practices. I was standing 10 feet away and it felt like I'd disappeared. On the drive home, I asked Josh about it. He shrugged. "It's not a big deal, Dad. I just kept it simple." But hearing my own son dodge my job like it was something to be ashamed of felt less like keeping it simple and more like getting slapped in the face by my own blood. And it wasn't just Josh. A few months later, I stopped by this little coffee shop near Rice University. Emily liked to work there, laptop open, latte, trying to look like every other up-and-coming business mind in Houston. I'd come to drop off a debit card she'd left at home. I spotted her in the corner with 2 friends, all polished and excited, talking about startups and seed money. One girl was bragging about her dad's tech company. The other's father was some big real estate guy in Dallas. Then they turned to Emily. "What about your dad?" She stirred her drink and said, "He's between things right now." Between things. I'd been with Houston Energy for 3.5 decades. There was no between. I was the guy they called when the city went dark. I walked over, smiled like I'd heard nothing, and set the card on the table. "Thought you might need this, Em." She went pale for half a second, then laughed it off. I didn't call her out, didn't make a scene. I just walked out with that phrase stuck in my chest. In that moment, I realized my own daughter would rather invent a pretend father than claim the one standing right in front of her. After a while, the shame turned into something else: entitlement. One evening, my phone buzzed. Josh. "Hey, Dad, listen, I need a favor." He starts explaining med school application fees, tests, travel. Total came to about $3,000. Then he said it. "I know you probably don't have this kind of money just lying around, but anything helps." He might as well have said, "I know you're basically broke, but want to pretend you can help?" I stared at the kitchen table for a second, at the stack of bills I never worried about, and at the folder in the garage full of rental income statements. "Text me the exact amount," I told him. Next day, I wrote the check. No lecture, no guilt trip. Just signed my name and handed it over. He took it, smiled, "Thanks, Dad, you're a lifesaver," and walked away. No question how I had $3,000 lying around. No curiosity, no respect, just expectation. In his mind, it didn't come from years of climbing poles or from smart moves after hours. To him, I was just a walking checkbook when everything else failed. Emily came at it a little different, but it stung just the same. She showed up one Sunday with a folder clutched to her chest, loan documents, projections for an MBA, big plans about networking and breaking into the industry. She sat at the table, all business. "So, the bank will approve a $30,000 loan, if I can get a co-signer." I nodded. "Okay. And what do you need from me?" She hesitated. "Well, I already asked Uncle Mark and one of Mom's friends, and they couldn't do it." Then she looked up, almost embarrassed, not for what she was about to say, but for even having to ask me. "You're literally my last option, Dad." Last option. Not first thought, not trusted anchor. The guy you call when everyone else says no. I didn't say much. I took the papers, filled them out, and signed. The bank approved it fast. My credit, my income, my history. The same between things father she'd been downplaying was solid enough for $30,000 on a signature. Nobody asked how. Nobody asked why. In that moment, it was crystal clear. My only value to them was being the last resort. After a while, I stopped trying to correct them. If my own family wanted to see me as small, fine. Let them. While they were out at nice restaurants posting pictures with fancy cocktails and skyline views, I was at the kitchen table with an old laptop and a yellow notepad. I found this video one night, some guy talking about cash flow, cap rates, and buying back your time. Normally I'd click past that kind of thing, but this time it stuck. I started binging that stuff. YouTube, library books with ugly covers, blogs written by guys who sounded like me, calloused hands, no MBA, just numbers and grit. And I realized something. My hard-earned money didn't have to disappear into bills the second it hit the account. It could buy me something I'd never really had. Freedom, security, the ability to look at retirement and not feel like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. So I set a quiet goal, build enough rentals so I'd never need to ask anyone for anything, not my wife, not my kids, not the city. If they insisted on seeing me as just a lineman, I'd quietly build something so big their opinion wouldn't matter. I decided to play the long game. The first real step in that long game was ugly. Pasadena, Texas. Not the pretty postcard version, just an old beaten-up duplex on a tired street, grass too high, paint peeling, roof sagging like it was exhausted from being ignored. The market had dipped. People were scared. All I saw was a for sale sign and a number I couldn't get out of my head. 15,000 down. That was overtime. Holiday storms, missed birthdays. Every 2 a.m. call out when the lines were down and the city was cussing in the dark. I signed the papers with hands that had more scars than savings. Weekends, I drove from Katy to Pasadena with a trunk full of tools. I scraped, patched, painted, ripped out carpet that smelled like a wet dog, fixed leaky sinks, learned how to lay laminate from a grainy YouTube video, worked my hands to the bone. Again. Only this time, it was for me. 6 months later, both units were rented. The checks came in, and after the mortgage was paid, there was money left over. Not much, but it was mine. And for the first time in my life, my money was working harder than I was. That Pasadena duplex was just the start. Once I saw it worked, I couldn't unsee it. A year later, there was a beat-up single-family place in Pearland, then a rough-looking triplex in Spring Branch, then a small brick building in the Heights that everyone else called too much trouble. To most people, they were just old houses on tired streets. To me, each one was another layer of armor around my future. Every overtime shift, every storm call, every Christmas I spent up a pole instead of at the table, that money went straight into those places. I set up an LLC, opened business accounts, kept the paperwork clean and separate. Ethan Cole, the man, came home filthy. Ethan Cole, the owner, stacked quiet equity. I'd walk through the door at night in a shirt stained with sweat and creosote, boots leaving dust on the tile. Linda would wrinkle her nose. The kids would barely look up. To them, the dirt meant I was stuck, small, going nowhere. They saw calloused hands and a tired back. They never saw the deeds in my briefcase. You'd think building all that would make home feel better. It didn't. Dinner used to be loud. Kids arguing, Linda laughing, TV humming in the background. Somewhere along the line, it turned into a quiet little courtroom. We'd sit at the table, same chairs, same plates, but it felt different. Linda talked to Josh about med school. She talked to Emily about business ideas and networking. With me, it was small talk, if anything. Weather, groceries, schedules. Never, "How was your day up there on those poles, Ethan?" Emily scrolled her phone between bites, smiling at a life that didn't include me. Josh would eat fast, say he had to get back to studying, and vanish. Me? I sat there listening to forks click on plates, feeling like the defendant at my own trial. Every sigh, every eye roll, every change of subject felt like another silent verdict. Not enough. Not impressive. Not what they wanted. After a while, staying late on a job site felt easier than coming back to that table. Home stopped feeling like a refuge. It started feeling like the place I went to be quietly judged. Right about the time home started feeling like a courtroom, Linda decided she needed to focus on herself. She joined this place called Iron House Fitness. At first I thought, good for her. We're not getting any younger. A little treadmill, a little stretching, why not? But it wasn't just the gym. Suddenly there were new leggings, new shoes, new sports bras showing up in Amazon boxes, new haircut, new highlights, a different perfume, something younger, sharper, the kind you don't wear for the man you've been married to for 35 years. She started coming home later. Workout was amazing, she'd say, cheeks flushed, big smile, like she'd just come back from a vacation instead of a gym. Her phone started living face down on the counter. If it buzzed, she'd slide it into her pocket and wander out to the patio to answer. Calls that used to happen on speaker suddenly needed privacy. On paper, nothing was wrong. In my chest, everything was. My gut knew before my mind did. This wasn't about cardio. The proof came in little pieces. One night I was going through the credit card statement, just making sure the auto pays were where they should be. A charge jumped out at me. A fancy restaurant near Iron House. 2 people, $80-something plus tip. That was the night she told me she was having dinner with her sister. Her sister's diabetic. She doesn't eat out like that anymore. I scrolled further. Iron House membership, upgraded. Basic plan bumped to some premium package with personal training included. Trainer's name, Ryan Cooper. I'd never heard of him, but I recognized the pattern. New gym, new clothes, new hair, new man. A few days later, her phone lit up on the counter while she was in the shower. I didn't go looking. The screen just woke up in front of me. Message at the top. Can't wait to see you again. R. I stared at that one line until my vision narrowed. I didn't throw the phone, didn't storm into the bathroom, didn't shout. I just set it back down, screen dark. I didn't need a detective. I just needed to open my eyes. Finding out about Ryan, that could have been the moment I blew everything up. You picture it, right? Yelling, broken dishes, her crying, me packing a bag. But I've spent my whole life around live wires. You learn real fast. You don't swing at power. You respect it. You study it. So instead of shouting, I sat in the garage with a folding table and a cheap printer and pulled out every file I had. Mortgage documents, closings, LLC paperwork, bank statements for the rental accounts. I remembered something one of the old guys at Houston Energy told me once. Information's more valuable than confrontation. So I treated this like a storm call. I emailed Karen, my attorney, not our attorney, mine. Asked her, real calm, how does Texas handle property if things change? She told me what I already suspected. If Linda filed, she'd be expecting half of everything she knew about. The house, the savings, my pension. She had no idea there was an entire portfolio sitting outside her field of vision, built on overtime and discipline she never bothered to ask about. I organized every page into neat stacks, labeled and dated. If they were planning their move, I'd better be ready with mine. It didn't take long for Linda's script to show up. One night after dinner, she leaned back in her chair, sighed the way people do when they're about to lie to themselves and you at the same time. We're carrying too much debt for people our age, Ethan, she said, like she'd suddenly discovered math. I let her talk. She floated the idea of selling the house in Katy, maybe getting something smaller, less maintenance. Said phrases that sounded rehearsed, fresh start, new chapter, time to think about what we really want. On the surface, it sounded reasonable, responsible even. But I'd seen the credit card statements. I'd seen the gym payments, the dinners, the little boutique charges that weren't for this house, this life, this marriage. I just nodded, took a sip of my coffee, and watched her carefully avoid my eyes. She wasn't worried about our future. She was positioning herself for hers. In her head, the plan was simple. Cash out the house, slice up what she thought was our only savings, walk away with half of everything, and right into a softer landing with her trainer waiting on the other side. In my head, all I could think was, she thinks she's about to cash out. She has no idea she's been sitting next to the real jackpot for years, and it's not hers to touch. There's a funny kind of calm that comes right before a storm. For me, it happened in the garage. I dragged out old boxes, laid everything on a folding table, mortgages, leases, bank statements, tax returns. Each page was a piece of a life nobody in that house seemed curious about. I started adding Pasadena, Pearland, Spring Branch, the Heights, a couple more scattered around Houston, rents in, mortgages out, what was left over. When I totaled the monthly cash flow, the number stared back at me. $15,000 every month, whether I climbed a pole or not. Then I looked at the equity, what those places would sell for versus what I owed. I did the math twice, then a third time just to be sure. Somewhere between the second and third calculation, it hit me. I was a self-made millionaire. Not in theory, not in dreams, on paper, in ink, me. The man who just works for the city. I scanned everything, saved it to a clean folder, and emailed it to Karen with a simple subject line. For our records. If they saw me as nothing now, wait until they realized what they'd just walked away from. The more I understood my own numbers, the harsher their attitude felt. Josh came home one weekend, textbook under his arm, stress written all over his face. We sat at the kitchen table, same place he once colored with crayons, now covered in med school pamphlets. Dad, I'm short on some expenses this term, he started. I need about $5,000. I didn't say no, I just asked, for what exactly? He rolled his eyes. I don't need to justify every expense to you, it's for school. The way he said you landed harder than the dollar amount. His tone didn't sound like a son asking his father for help. It sounded like a customer irritated at a bank teller for asking too many questions. In that moment, I saw it clearly. In his head, my money wasn't my money. It was part of some invisible family pot that he and his mother already had claims on. This wasn't a favor. It wasn't gratitude. It was a withdrawal. They weren't asking their father. They were accessing what they thought they already owned. Not long after Josh's $5,000 withdrawal, Emily called. Her voice was bright, excited, the way people sound when they're talking about a future they haven't paid for yet. Dad, I've got this amazing opportunity, she said. She wanted to launch a small boutique fitness studio. Women over 40, classes, branding, the whole dream board package. I just need about $3,500 for startup costs, she went on. You know you want me to succeed, right? Not, can you afford this? Not, is this a good time, Dad? Just a statement that my desire to see her happy automatically came with a price tag. I listened. I asked a few questions. She answered like the money was already in motion, like I was just part of the paperwork. And I said yes. I gave it to her. I always had. But when I hung up, something settled in my chest. Heavy. Cold. Linda. Josh. Emily. 3 people with 3 different dreams, all fueled by one assumption, that my only job on this earth was to bankroll their lives. It hit me then. They didn't see me as a man anymore, just a funding source that happened to answer when they called Dad. Once you see it that clearly, you can't unsee it. I sat with Karen in her office. Cheap coffee, stacks of files, that humming fluorescent light you hear more than you see. She walked me through Texas law in calm, steady sentences. If she files and we do this the usual way, Karen said, a judge will split what she knows about: house, shared savings, retirement accounts tied to your job. Katie house? Fine. Joint savings? Fine. Even the pension I'd earned one storm at a time. But the properties? The empire built out of overtime checks and sacrifice while they rolled their eyes at my city job? No. Those weren't marital toys to divide up. Those were the one thing in my life that belonged entirely to the man nobody bothered to really see. I drove home that day with one thought drilling into my skull. If I stayed quiet, they'd walk away thinking they'd taken half of my life. And then another thought slid in right behind it, sharper. If my life was going to explode, it might as well happen on my terms. Somewhere between the office and the driveway, the idea landed. My retirement party. A room full of people who actually respected what I'd done. If they wanted a show, I'd give them one. A few nights before the party, Linda made pot roast. She only made that on 2 occasions, when we had company or when she felt guilty. We didn't have company. The house smelled like slow-cooked beef and onions, but the air at the table was tight. Josh had driven in. Emily was there too. All 4 of us, like some old picture we'd forgotten how to pose for. We ate in this weird, polite quiet. Then Josh said, we should do this more, while we still can. He said it light, but it hit my ear like a verdict already stamped and filed. While we still can. Like my presence had an expiration date everyone knew about but me. I set my fork down. Something on your mind? I asked. They all glanced at each other. Linda gave Josh a look. Emily shifted in her chair. Nobody answered right away. Just this long pause where every unsaid word sat between the mashed potatoes and the gravy bowl. In that silence, I knew this wasn't dinner. This was the warm-up for whatever they'd already decided was coming next. Linda was the first to really step into it. She folded her napkin, placed it next to her plate like she was about to deliver a speech instead of blow up a life. I've been thinking a lot about the next chapter, she started. Sometimes people grow in different directions. They want different things. Different directions, different things. Not us, not we, just soft words wrapped around a hard point. Josh cleared his throat. Dad, we've been talking about your future, and Mom's. Maybe it's time to restructure things, financially. Restructure. Funny word for cutting a man in half. Emily chimed in, eyes full of the kind of pity you reserve for someone you've already judged. Most people your age have more to show, Dad, like a business or real assets. Something bigger. There it was. All 3 of them, lined up like an intervention, except I wasn't the one destroying anything. They were. They talked about what's fair, what makes sense, what would make Mom happy. I let them finish. Every word, every justification, every gentle knife. When they finally stopped, I took a sip of water and said, very calmly, you've clearly given this a lot of thought. Linda didn't like that I saw how much thought they'd put into carving me up. That's not fair, Ethan, she said quickly. Nobody's talking about divorce. We're just exploring options. I tilted my head. Options like splitting assets, moving on, starting over. She put a hand to her chest like I'd insulted her. That's ridiculous. I let that hang for half a second. Is Ryan Cooper ridiculous too? Every fork stopped midair. Josh frowned. Who's Ryan? Emily's eyes jumped to her mother. Linda went pale in a way no gym workout could explain. The room went so quiet I could hear the clock in the hallway. I looked straight at her. You want to talk about new chapters? Different directions? Maybe we should start with the personal trainer you've been working out with for the last 8 months. Her mouth opened, then shut. No denial, just shock that I'd said it out loud. Josh and Emily stared at her like they were seeing her for the first time. I pushed my chair back and stood. Maybe before you three start planning how to restructure my life, I said, you should get to know the man you're planning to divorce. Linda was gone before sunrise the next morning. She left a note on the counter. Early shift, don't wait up for me. She didn't work mornings, not once in all the years I'd known her. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and let the quiet settle. The storm had finally started, whether anyone admitted it or not. My phone buzzed. Mr. Cole, this is Jenny from Lone Star Property Management. We've got a leak reported at the Pasadena duplex, upstairs bathroom. Want us to send a plumber, or do you want your guy on it? My voice slipped into a different gear, the one my family had never bothered to listen for. Send our usual plumber, log it, and email me the work order, I said. Make sure the tenant knows we're on it today. 10 minutes later, another call. Hey, Mr. Cole, it's Maria from the Heights building. The couple in 3B wants to renew their lease early. They're asking if they can lock in for another 2 years. We talked terms, small rent bump, paperwork timing. I hung up and caught movement in the doorway. Josh, hair messy, t-shirt, bare feet. He'd heard every word. You manage properties? He asked, confused. I looked at him over my coffee. My tenants, I said, know exactly what I do for them. They respect it. What I didn't add, but felt down to the bone, was simple. My tenants respected me more than my own family ever did. Josh leaned on the doorway, still trying to process the calls he'd heard. Since when do you own buildings? He asked. I didn't answer that one. Not yet. Instead, I looked at him and said, Josh, what do you think I make in a year? He frowned like it was a trick question. I don't know, 40, maybe 50 grand. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so far off. Base pay is around 78, I said. With overtime and storm calls, I was just under 100 last year. His mouth opened a little like he wanted to argue but didn't have the numbers to fight with. Right then, my phone rang again. Ethan, this is Steve from Property Solutions. Refi paperwork on the Perlin place looks good. We'll send the new terms to your business email, the voice said. Congrats again on getting the Heights building fully leased. I thanked him, hung up, and let the silence sit. Josh was staring at me like he'd just realized his father had a second life. Dad, how many properties do you own? I picked up my coffee. Josh, I said quietly, maybe the real question is this. Why have you never once asked what I do with my money? Then came the night everything was supposed to be simple. My retirement party. American Legion Hall in Katy, Texas. Cheap chairs, long plastic tables, a banner that said, Happy Retirement Ethan, strung a little crooked over the stage. Balloons, store-bought sheet cake, coolers full of beer and sweet tea. The kind of blue-collar celebration I actually understood. The place was packed. Guys I'd climbed poles with 20, 30 years. Supervisors, new apprentices, a couple of neighbors, even a few tenants who'd somehow heard and shown up to shake my hand. Mike, my supervisor, took the mic first. He talked about hurricanes, ice storms, blazing summers, about how in 35 years I'd never had a major accident on my watch, called me steady, solid, reliable as sunrise. The whole room clapped. Some stood up. They weren't pretending. They meant it. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Not as just city stuff, not as between things, not as the last option on a loan form, but as a man who'd shown up day after day and carried his share of the weight. In that room, I was a hero. Everywhere except at my own table. If anyone had walked in halfway through that night, they'd have thought Linda was the perfect wife. She stuck to my side just enough for photos, arm around my shoulders, head tilted in that practiced way. Somebody handed her a scrapbook full of old pictures, me in a hard hat, up in the bucket truck, snow on my jacket, mud on my boots. "I put this together myself," she told anyone who'd listen. Neighbors smiled at me. "You're lucky to have her, Ethan." I nodded, because that's what you do. Josh and Emily were in the corner, faces lit by their phones, more interested in whatever was on their screens than the man whose name was printed on the banner. I watched Linda move through the room, laughing, hugging, telling stories about all the nights I worried he wouldn't come home, soaking in the attention like it was hers. And standing there, I saw it clear as day. There was the version of her this room believed in, the loyal, supportive wife of a hard-working man. And then there was the version I'd seen in gym leggings, whispering into her phone on the back patio. That night, my wife wasn't celebrating me. She was setting the stage. At some point, the room settled. People had eaten, refilled drinks, told their stories. The mic was passed back to Linda. She walked up to the front like she owned the place, smile warm, eyes just a little wet for effect. "I just want to say a few words," she began. "Being married to a lineman isn't easy. There were nights I lay awake wondering if Ethan would come home safe. He always put work before everything else, always put the city, the storms, the lines, first." The crowd murmured. Sympathy, respect. They thought she was building to some emotional thank you. "So," she continued, "this feels like the right time, for both of us, to start a new chapter." I felt something shift inside my chest. She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. Not a card, not a letter, an envelope thick with legal weight. She walked over, handed it to me, and said into the microphone, "These are divorce papers. I filed them yesterday." The room went dead silent. Plastic forks froze midair. Conversations died half-sentence. 100 eyes locked onto us as I stared down at 14 pages that were supposed to erase 35 years. My retirement party had just turned into my execution. For a second, nobody moved. I was still holding that envelope when I heard footsteps behind me. Josh stepped up next to his mother, took the mic like he'd practiced this in his head. "Dad," he said, voice steady, "we support this decision. It's for the best." The room shifted. Chairs creaked. People glanced at each other. Then Emily chimed in, laughing this nervous little laugh that didn't sound nervous at all. "Honestly," she added, "this might be the best day ever." Best day ever. My divorce. My life being cut in half on the same night they were honoring my work. Some people in the crowd winced. A couple of the older guys shook their heads. You could feel the judgment turning, and for once, it wasn't aimed at me. Josh and Emily smiled like a weight had finally slid off their shoulders, like their embarrassing blue-collar father had just been officially removed from their future. I looked at my own flesh and blood. My son calling my destruction a celebration. My daughter treating my marriage like stale wallpaper finally being peeled off. Hearing him call my divorce the best day ever. That was the moment something inside me died. And something else woke up. I didn't tear up. I didn't beg. I folded the divorce papers, slid them into my jacket pocket, and stood up. The mic was still in Linda's hand. I didn't reach for it. I just spoke loud enough that everyone could hear. "If we're being honest tonight," I said, "I should be honest too." Linda stiffened. "This isn't necessary, Ethan," she hissed. "Oh, I think it is." I looked out over the crowd, coworkers, neighbors, tenants, people who'd seen me in storms and blackouts and never once doubted which side I was on. "My wife wants you to believe this is about new chapters and different dreams," I said. "What she left out is the part where she's been spending the last 8 months getting personal training from a guy named Ryan Cooper at Iron House Fitness." A ripple went through the room. The upgraded membership, the dinners near the gym she called girls' nights, the texts that say, "Can't wait to see you again, R." Heads turned toward her. Faces changed. Linda's color drained. She opened her mouth like she might deny it, then realized half of what I'd said could be verified with one look at her phone and bank statement. I didn't raise my voice. "My wife didn't leave a failure," I told them. "She cheated on a man she thought was small." I let the room sit in that truth for a moment. My wife, the devoted partner, caught with her trainer. Then I shifted. "You filed for divorce yesterday, right, Linda?" I said. "You're asking for half of everything you think I have." She swallowed, eyes flashing. "I'm entitled to—" "You filed for half of nothing," I cut in. "Problem is, I'm not nothing." I turned back to the crowd. "Since nobody here ever bothered to ask what I do with my money, let me clear it up. Over the last 15 years, while I've been just working for the city, I've bought 11 rental properties across Greater Houston." The room stirred, chairs scraped. Someone actually whistled. "Those places bring in around $15,000 a month in rent," I went on, "and right now they're worth about $2.1 million altogether." A woman near the front, Susan Miller, an attorney I knew by sight, spoke up. "If those were bought with his separate funds and held in his name," she said, looking straight at Linda, "they're very likely his separate property under Texas law." I didn't have to gloat. It was already written on every face in that hall. My simple blue-collar life had built more wealth than her entire circle combined. You could feel the doubt trying to claw its way in. People believe numbers, sure, but they believe live proof more. And right on cue, my phone rang. The hall was so quiet you could hear it vibrate on the table. I checked the screen. Jenny from Lone Star Property Management. I held it up so everyone could see the name, then answered on speaker. "Hey, Mr. Cole, sorry to bother you after hours," she said. "We just got a cash offer on the Pearland place. Buyer's coming in at $215,000. You picked it up for $160, right? Looks like you'll clear about $55,000 if you take it." You could almost hear Linda's heartbeat from across the room. I smiled. "Thanks, Jenny," I said, loud and clear. "Let me think about it. I'll call you tomorrow." "Sounds good. And congrats again," she added. "You've built a really solid portfolio." When I hung up, every doubt in the room was dead. I looked at Linda. "Real estate appreciates," I said quietly, but not so quiet people missed it. Unlike some other investments I've made. Once the shock settled, I decided to finish what Linda started. "Since everything's out in the open," I said, "let's talk about what you are actually getting." I looked at her, then at the room. "The joint savings account you know about?" I held up a hand. "There's $8,400 in it, not $84,000. $8,400, a murmur ran through the crowd. "The house in Katy?" I went on. "After the mortgage and fees, there's maybe $40,000 in equity left. My half is $20,000. I turned back to Linda. "You can have it, my half of that equity, my half of the savings, every penny of what you knew existed." 35 years of marriage, and she was walking away with something between $24,000 and $28,000, less than a mid-range car. I pulled the envelope from my jacket, uncapped a pen, and signed the divorce papers right there in front of everyone. No shaking hand, no hesitation. Then I handed the envelope back to her. "Congratulations," I said, "on your new freedom." She left a millionaire with less than a new car's worth of cash. The party ended, but the fallout didn't. A few days later, Karen called me, barely hiding the amusement in her voice. "David, your wife's attorney, just rang my office," she said. He sounded rattled. No surprise there. At mediation, David laid out Linda's position like he still believed he had leverage. "We're asking for a fair division of all marital assets," he said. "Real estate, income streams, the works." Karen didn't argue. She simply opened a binder. She walked them through it, page by page. Purchase dates, bank transfers from my personal earnings, LLC ownership, separate business accounts. Every property bought with overtime and hazard pay she never asked about, titled cleanly in my name. "These aren't part of the marital pool," Karen said calmly. "Your client had access to joint funds. She didn't ask where the rest went. That doesn't make it hers." Linda's face twisted. "This isn't fair," she snapped. "We were married." I looked at her across the table. "You were embarrassed by my career," I said. "That's different." For the first time, she understood the price of underestimating a quiet man. In the end, the numbers were simple. The settlement gave Linda exactly what we'd already laid out in that hall, the Katy house, once it sold, and half of the joint savings she knew about. After closing costs and the last of the small debts, she walked away with just under $30,000. Not nothing, but not the life she'd pictured when she stood on that stage either. Ryan didn't stick around long after mediation. Millionaire husband? Fun to mock. Broke ex-wife with a used Accord and no real claim on his money? Not so much. He faded out, texts slower, calls shorter, until he was gone. Linda ended up in a one-bedroom apartment in West Chase. Thin walls, shared parking, neighbors who smoked too close to her door. Book club stopped inviting her. Her sister got too busy. The same women who once nodded along when she joked about my lack of ambition suddenly had a new punchline. She left a millionaire for a gym trainer, I heard one neighbor say in HEB. Tell me again who didn't think things through? She spent years calling me unambitious. Turns out she'd been living off my ambition the whole time. Life didn't just change for Linda. Josh's final year med school bill came due, tuition, fees, living costs. When all the grants and standard loans shook out, he was $30,000 short. There was no family fund anymore. No house to refinance, no illusion that mom would figure it out. So he called me. Dad, I need help, he said. The confidence was gone. His voice had a crack in it I hadn't heard since he was a boy. He laid it out. 30 grand. Promised he'd pay me back after residency. Said he couldn't bear the thought of dropping out this close to the end. I listened. Let him finish. Then I said, Do you remember what you said at my retirement party, Josh? Silence. You called it the best day ever, I reminded him. Best day ever. Watching your mother hand me divorce papers. Dad, I was angry. I heard you, I cut in. And I don't loan money to people who celebrated my disaster. On his end of the line, nothing but breathing. Actions have consequences. That was the bill he had to pay. Emily's turn came not long after Josh's. The bank had turned her down for a $65,000 loan to open her studio. Good concept, weak collateral, no co-signer. The kind of no that actually means not without someone solid behind you. She called me, voice shaking. Dad, they said no. This is my dream. I've worked so hard. I need you to co-sign. You're my father. You're supposed to help. That line, you're supposed to, landed hard. I sat there, staring at the rent roll from my properties, the numbers that had kept this family alive while everyone pretended I was barely scraping by. Emily, I asked, since when did you start seeing me as anything but poor? She went quiet. Then the excuses came. I was young. I didn't mean it like that. You know I'm proud of you. No, I said. What I know is that you were embarrassed of me until your dream bounced off a bank's desk. Silence again. It's funny, I added, how dreams only seem to find me when somebody needs a check. They weren't calling because they missed me. They were calling because the money ran out. Eventually Linda called too. Not angry this time. Soft. Careful. The way people talk when they're walking barefoot over broken glass. We made mistakes, she started. All of us. Maybe we can fix this, Ethan. I leaned back, let her talk. She floated counseling. Time apart. Then, almost in a whisper, we could even remarry. Start over. Do it right. I didn't raise my voice. I just asked, do you want to remarry me or my money? I love you, she said quickly, desperate. I always have. I listened to the tremor in her voice. It didn't sound like love. It sounded like fear, of bills, of rent, of being invisible now that the story had flipped and everyone knew who'd really carried what. You loved the man you thought I wasn't, I told her. The harmless, small, easy-to-leave failure. I let that sink in. Not the man I actually am. There was nothing else to say. I wasn't her safety net anymore, and I wasn't going back to being her shame either. Josh couldn't close the gap. No loans, no co-signer, no magic fix. So he did the one thing he'd never pictured for himself. He withdrew from med school for the year and took a job at Home Depot. $12 an hour, orange apron, name tag, on his feet all day. A few months in, he showed up at my place. No folder in his hand, no numbers on his tongue, just him. We sat on the back porch, watching the sun bleed out over the fence. He cleared his throat. My supervisor, he said, treats me better than I treated you. I didn't say anything. I get it now, he went on. Hard-earned money, coming home tired, smelling like work, people looking down on you because they think they're better. I did that to you. He looked me straight in the eye for the first time in a long time. I'm not here to ask for money, Dad. I want to earn your respect back, not your wallet. For the first time since that night at the hall, I didn't just see my son. I saw a man starting over. Emily's lesson came quieter, but it came. She didn't get the studio loan, no miracle investor, no sudden inheritance. So she started small, teaching early morning classes at a little independent gym in Houston. No neon sign, no influencer vibe, just regular women trying to feel stronger. One afternoon, my phone rang. "Hey, Dad," she said. Her voice was tired, but there was something solid under it. "I just got my first full paycheck from the gym." "How's it feel?" I asked. She laughed, a short, real sound. "Different. Money I earn myself. It lands different. I think about every dollar." There was a pause. "I used to treat you like a walking ATM," she admitted. "And like, this embarrassing part of my story. Poor dad, small job, whatever. I was wrong." Silence stretched, but it wasn't hostile this time. "Thank you," she said, "for not rescuing me. I'd never have learned this if you had." Before we hung up, she added one more thing. "Respect isn't inherited, Dad, it's earned." Hearing my own daughter say that, I realized my toughest no had taught them more than a lifetime of easy yeses. I'm not telling you this for revenge. I'm telling it because for 35 years I was the guy in the background, the husband who just works for the city, the dad who was between things, the walking checkbook nobody respected until the money stopped coming. I went from being the man my own family was ashamed of to a quiet millionaire who finally learned how to pick his battles. Along the way, I traded pieces of myself for a roof and a light bill, for some kind of love, for a little damn respect that never showed up. Here's what I know now. Quiet men aren't weak. We're just careful about what we fight for. Sometimes that means walking away from the people who only loved what you could provide and starting over with your dignity intact. If you're a quiet provider listening to this, your worth is not decided by who claps when you fall. It's decided by what you build when nobody's watching. Tell me in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated in your own family? Hit subscribe, stick around. We've got more hard truths to talk about.